Yeah, so that sounds like it's describing something very vague that may sound like to you that that's hell, but honestly, that didn't sound like hell at all.
No problem. So can you look at the verse and can you exegete it? Can you tell us what's happening in the verse?
Nope.
Wow. All right. I'm gonna read it real quick. So verse
Jeez.
22 says, Assyria is there and all her company, its graves all around, all of them slain, falling by the sword, whose graves are set apart in the uttermost parts of the pit. And her company is all around her grave, all of them slain, falling by the sword, who spread terror in the land of the living. This is talking about judgment that's coming upon Assyria and a lament that's coming over Egypt. And when it's talking about Syria being slain, they go into their grave, i.e., Sheol, into the pit within the earth where the slain go, or in this case, these are military soldiers who are slain and killed by the sword, and they get buried in the ground. That is Sheol, in the grave. That's the
So you're saying
context,
every pit
right?
is hell? Every pit that's ever made is hell? That's what you're saying?
Every pit that ever, no, that's not true. Every pit ever
So
been
are
made
you
doesn't
saying
have
that
their
every
bodies in it.
cemetery in America or in the world are
That's
just
Sheol. Every
hell?
cemetery and what you put a body in, that
Right.
body is going to Sheol.
Right.
Sheol is taking that body.
Right.
What do you mean by taking that body?
So, what do you think happens to the body once it's placed in the grave, sir?
Why don't you tell me what you believe and I'll tell you how
What
you,
I believe,
how
there's
foolish
something
this
called
is.
entomology, and entomology is the examination of insects and how insects break down the metabolic structures on the outside of the flesh and the tissues and the sinews in regards to
Oh, okay,
decomposition
good,
when a body is placed in the grave that is void of life, the thing that animates
okay,
it.
good.
So you want me to get more
No,
intricate
no,
with that?
no.
I
I
can get
thought
more detailed if you
no.
want. I can bring articles out and everything if you're not familiar with that
Yeah, no. I
process.
thought you were gonna just go very spiritual on me with that answer. I'm glad that you went that way, though. Thank you.
Right. So now respond to the way that he went. Because I think what you
Respond to
feel.
what though?
Hold on, Bert. Oh, just
Because
let me just say
by
this right
using
quick.
that, you can't tell me that hell
Bert,
exists.
let me just say this right quick.
That's just your
I think
perception,
you feel.
perspective,
I think
opinion,
you feel like
belief.
we're. I think you feel like we're spiritual in a sense, like we're illogical. How Christianity
No, I
would
don't
feel.
think you're
No, we're
spiritual
not.
because
Hold
spirits
on.
don't
Let me just finish
exist.
my
No,
own
I don't
sentence.
think you're spiritual because spirits
Let
don't
me finish my
exist.
own sentence. Let me finish my own sentence. So I'm saying what I'm saying is spiritual the way that is it is used colloquially. Like we're illogical and we're just so dreamy and away from actual literal points to where when he just responded you with logic, you just yielded and acted like you didn't. So can you respond to what he said directly that you were not familiar with?
What is that? The only part that I'm not familiar with is this weird concept that you have that graves are hell.
Does the Bible say graves are hell?
Again, you cannot prove something with the Bible. That's not how this works. It's pretty
So you
fucking
so
simple.
the
Like, I mean, look, if you want to believe in this fairy tale, you know what I mean, La La Land thing, hey, every grave is hell, go ahead. But I'm just telling you, that's your belief. It's not the truth, it's your interpretation of the Bible. And that's all. Have a
so let
nice
me
day.
ask you a question. If a statement has been made in a literary text and we are referencing that primary source, then how is it not true?
Because what you read did not say every grave is hell. Did it? Or did I miss that? Because you
Okay, so
guys.
we didn't say every grave. We're getting you what's called a point of reference. And in that
Oh.
framework, within that point of reference, we're trying to detail for you how our interpretation about Sheol, which is the word
Right there.
used in the
Right
Tanakh,
there.
the
I'm
Old
so
Testament,
glad that you said
for
your
hell means grave.
interpretation. I'm so happy you said that. Your interpretation. So you agree that none of this is actually true. It's just your interpretation.
Okay, hold on. So when you say
Yes or
true,
no?
hold on. Let me answer your question. When you say true, true according to what? Are we still talking about the literary text or
True
outside
as
the text? If we're
something.
talking about
True
outside the
as
text, that's a whole nother
true as
conversation.
something as you can provide me actual evidence of.
Evidence within the literature itself, which is
No,
the point of
no.
reference and
Like go.
primary source we're
Oh my
using.
God! Why is it so hard for you guys to go outside of your religious books just to fucking
Okay, all
learn?
right, slow
Or
down, brother. Slow down, slow down. Because now here's the problem, Christian Corey. Apparently, he doesn't want to talk about the Bible. He does not see the Bible as anything, a statement of truth, books of truth, or anything like that. If that's the case, then why are we speaking past each other? If you want to have a conversation outside the text, then just say that.
Right.
Because
I'm
you guys are
confused.
trying to you're making claims and assumptions
Hold on,
just
Divine.
by using the Bible because of what the
I get
Bible
what you're
says.
saying, Bert.
And you don't
I get what
realize
you're saying.
how fucking ridiculous you
No,
sound.
I get what you're saying. So this is what he's saying, Divine. He's saying this. We're using the Bible as our reference. Though we look at it as ancient text, and we're using it as our reference, we should not use it as our reference. We should use other things, historical points, maybe secular history to talk about those things. And I think that's the angle that he's pushing. And Divine, it seems like you're prepared to go in that angle, and Bert is not addressing that he's prepared to go in that angle. So, Bert, if we sit the Bible down, are you prepared to go into secular history right now with Divine on the same topic or any other said topic?
Well, if the topic is that we're trying to prove whether or not hell is an actual thing,
No, I don't think we can do that. First, you have to agree if the
You
Bible
you
is
don't
true.
know. You don't know. You're saying don't use the Bible.
right? I'm
Divine is saying I'm prepared to have a conversation with you with the Bible, but would you like to introduce other sources?
right, but
So
look,
would you like
okay,
to have the conversation with Divine
Could I?
Prospect on
Could
other
I?
sources as
Could I
well?
interject?
okay, but what
Amari, no,
is?
I'm not
Oh no,
asking you.
Amari,
I
hold
know
on.
why you're trying to get in there because y'all feel like Divine Prospect will drown you in that space too.
What do you mean? I'm
All you
I
not
got to
don't
trying
do
think
to.
is
so.
just answer the question.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not
there's
even
nothing
trying.
that he
I'm
can
trying
say.
to.
He believes in the fucking
That's my.
Bible, dog.
That's the
So,
problem.
so
Bert
would you
doesn't
like to
believe in the
use
Bible.
sources outside of the Bible?
Or he's a fucking Hebrew Israelite. He doesn't
So,
fucking
would
be
you
on
like to
anything.
use sources outside of the Bible?
Okay, so
I got a
what are
question,
we
Christian.
talking about? Are we trying to
Everybody got
prove
questions,
what
but
God
nobody
is?
want to answer whether they want to use sources outside of the Bible as well.
There
Sure,
is
but
no
what are
source outside the
yes?
Bible.
I
What
divine
are we?
prospect. He said yes. I'll mute up.
All right.
So then, what
All
are
right.
we
So,
talking about? Are we trying to prove that hell exists?
all right. So when we showcase to you, so let me ask you a question.
So now nobody wants to answer that
The
question.
Assyrian, this I'm going to follow your line of reasoning. Okay.
No, did you hear my
It,
question though?
I heard your
Because I
question.
don't know
We
what we're
showed you
talking about. I
earlier
don't know what we're
that
talking about.
Sheol means the grave. So when somebody dies, they get buried into the ground, and that is called Sheol.
And
Okay. So
Sheol
we
is
went ahead.
hell.
Sheol is what is translated as hell. Okay, so you have two different things that's going on here, right? So you have the original languages, which is making a proposal in regards to their premise of what happens to an individual once they die, they get buried. That's a custom that in the ancient East is very common amongst those who wants to revere and respect the dead, hence why it's done today as well. So in that time, when there are translators translating that to English, when you have religious thought forms that are dictating the lexeme of how they determine the semantic range and value of particular words coming from a donor language or recipient language, what happens is there is something lost in translation. What we're doing is we're underlining that and getting back to the root cause, and we're trying to answer a question to you in the most logical means possible. Are you following?
Yes, but you can't.
No? Okay, cool. All right. So now with that, hold on. With that being said, now let's go ahead and have the conversation. Assyria. Did Assyria as a nation and empire
Is
exist? Yes
hell
or
a
no?
real place or not?
You're not,
No,
I
because
just
you're
answered your question.
deflecting, bro. You're
Hell is the
deflecting,
grave.
bro.
Hell is the grave. When last time I went to a
Hell is
cemetery, I
not a
saw a
grave.
bunch of bodies that
I'm
was
sorry,
buried
but hell
in
is
the
not a grave.
ground, and that's
I'm sorry,
called the
but
grave.
hell, no, no. According to you, from your perspective, that is not what a grave is. I'm sorry. We're just gonna have to disagree on that. There's really
That
no
is not
conversation
what.
that we
So
can.
grave. Wait. So let me ask you a question then. So in Hebrew, how do you say grave?
It doesn't matter how you say it in any language. I'm telling you that a grave that you're talking about in a cemetery is not hell.
All right, so
Simple as
brother,
that.
let me ask you. Okay,
Why? Because hell
what is?
doesn't exist.
Okay, gotcha. So
Why?
what is
Because
hell?
heaven doesn't exist.
What is hell, brother? What is hell?
Hell is a concept that you motherfuckers made up. You tell me.
I'm a
No, matter of
motherfucker
fact,
that
you
made up
can't. You
hell.
can't
Last
tell
time
me
I
because
checked, I
you.
didn't get credit for
Yeah,
that.
but you're
Wiki
being
doesn't
difficult.
credit me for making up the concept of hell.
Yeah, yeah, no,
So
yeah, you
me as
can't
a
tell me because
motherfucker,
you have
according
a.
to you, did not create that. So let's move past that. Let's stay logical. 'Cause you're getting too emotional right now. Stay logical. I'm trying to be logical with you, right? So I'm
I'm
asking you
very
a question.
logical.
What is define hell for us? So we make sure we're using the same lexeme so our conversations do not overlap one another. What is hell?
What is hell? Jeez. How about
Uh-oh.
a fucking bottomless pit, right? Where there's lake of burning sulfur and
All right. So let me ask you a question. In the earth, are there pits that lead to molten rock? I don't know what's going on right now. All right, so let's transition to another conversation then.
Hey, that
All
was a
right.
pretty good one, though. I'm not gonna lie, that was a
I don't
good
know
one.
what's going on right now.
Hey,
Last time I
I got a
checked,
question though.
yeah.
I swiped out. My bad,
I
my bad.
think it. Oh, go ahead, Bert.
Yeah, so he said, "What's hell?" Define it, right? Yes, is that what you
That's what
asked,
I asked.
sir?
You said a bottomless pit that leads to what?
No, I didn't say it leads to anywhere. I just said lake of burning sulfur.
Okay.
Uh,
All right.
it
So
it it's
so a
hold on.
lake
Can I
of
finish?
burning
Can I finish though?
sulfur.
Can I finish
Wait,
though?
wait. You
Can I
said a
finish though?
bottomless pit, a lake of
God
burning sulfur.
damn
I'm
it!
trying
Can
to
I
follow,
finish though?
brother. I'm trying to
Bro, it's
itemize
not
what you're
that hard
saying
to
so I can
follow
follow the
though. It's
conversation.
not that
I'm
hard to
trying to follow
follow
what your
though,
answer is.
son. Oh my
All right, go
god,
ahead.
bro.
Go
It's
ahead.
not that hard to follow. You act like that's the thing, bro. Y'all complicate this shit way too much, son. It's simple. The concept of hell is what? It's traditionally seen as a place of punishment for sin. Yes or no?
No.
It's not traditionally seen as a place of punishment for sin?
No, it's not seen because it's not empirical data you use to determine it, but it is something that
Oh
is
my.
perceived through ideation.
Perceived.
Now,
Okay.
wait,
You're right.
brother, slow down, slow down. I'm trying to walk with you. It's perceived via ideation. Now, please interpret to us what perception through ideation is.
I don't know. You tell me.
All right, got it. So, perception through ideation is when I creatively form a thought form from my mind and I impose it into my reality. Okay,
Right.
because this is how I'm perceiving what's called a worldview. This is how you develop a worldview, right? So what you are defining, which I don't know which dictionary you're using, what lexicon you use, I have no clue where you're getting your definition from. But if we're going to
I
have
just
a
made it up.
civil conversation, you have to have a point of reference. And then with that point of reference, it has
I
to
just made
lead
it
to
up.
the semantic range in which that word possesses. Now, where are you getting your definition from hell?
I just made it up.
Okay,
You
got it.
asked me to
See, this is
define it and
why
I defined it.
this is why it's hard to have a logical conversation with people that just make stuff up. You have a gripe against people who believe
Is
in
that
hell, but yet you're making stuff
was I
up.
off?
How does
Was
that
I
work?
off?
You
Was
are
I
off.
wrong? Was
Yes,
I
yes,
wrong
you're
about
off
that?
because, brother, the reason why you're off is because you're making it up. I can't fact check what you're saying.
Okay, so just Google what is hell, and I bet you it'll say half of the shit. Most of this shit that I just said.
Okay, so most of the shit you just said. All right. So what we're trying to do, what me and Corey are trying to do, is trying to take a moment to showcase to
I'm not
you
talking to
that
Corey. I'm talking to you, bro. What do you need?
I
Your
got
brother to help
I
you? You need
got
the
you.
big brother to help you?
Hold on. Slow down. I'm an OG, my nigga. So let's slow down for a second. I don't know if you
You
realize
ain't
you're
no
getting your
OG
butt
of
whooped,
mine, bro. You ain't no
but
OG of
you
mine.
need to. I don't. I
You
need
can
to be an
relax with all
OG
that
of you.
OG talk.
Slow
Anybody who
down, my
names
nigga.
themselves
Slow
divine
down,
is
my
definitely not
nigga.
no
Slow
fucking.
down. Slow down. Chill, my nigga. Because I'm trying to get deep, but now I got to get niggerish with you. Tell me which direction you want to go, my G.
Oh,
Where you
you
want to
said the
go?
wrong N word.
Where you want to go?
You said the
All
wrong
right, so
N
now let's
word.
keep it
You're not
academic
supposed
and
to
let's
say
keep it
that word.
respectful. With that being said, I was calling you my brother earlier, so I'm going to be level-headed. What I'm asking you is if you are not able to provide us with a primary source for that definition, and that is in your mind, you are ideating a concept that you cannot point to in real life. So you are no better than the ones that you're talking about that are believing in hell.
That's not
So,
true.
can you please give us, okay, so then please point to us a source that defines the term as you see it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Let me look it up for you, buddy.
Okay, no problem.
God damn, this guy seems like the concept of hell has changed because he thinks that it's all in graves. Great.
Well, in his eyes, white people are hell, and they run hell, so it's all good.
In my eyes, I never said that, so I don't know what you're talking about. I never said that. So that's another fallacy that you're doing right there. It's an ad hominem, an appeal to an authority in which I never proposed. So where are you getting that from? When did I ever say that?
What am I looking up again? Is hell real or oh no,
The,
wait.
defi- the
What is?
definition of hell,
Oh, the definition of hell.
correct. From a reputable source, preferably Cambridge or Oxford.
But not the Bible.
Yeah, no, you can't use the Bible.
I don't know who said that. So the reason why we can't use the Bible because said person in adversarial position to me is making an assertion that the
All
Bible
right, a
itself is
place
not
regarded
true
in
in its
various
proposition
religions.
about hell. So therefore, I'm asking the person to provide me a reputable source in regards to the definition of hell. That's how we're working right now.
Okay, so this is from Oxford. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Yes, he
Okay.
said Oxford.
A place regarded in various religions as a spiritual realm of evil and suffering. Sounds like something I said. Often traditionally depicted as a place of perpetual fire beneath the earth where the wicked are punished after death. What the fuck was so different than what I said?
A lot.
Nothing.
There's some nuance you miss, clearly. Because
Oh,
that
it's no
actual
nuance I
wait,
missed.
slow
Are
down
you
for
an
1 second.
Israelite?
I'm gonna walk you through this.
Are you an
Okay,
Israelite?
we don't have to deal with ad hominems.
Because
I
if
don't know
you
what you are,
are,
and I
then
don't
there's
care. I'm
some
only dealing with
fucking
truth.
nuances that you're gonna
So
miss.
you want to do character defamation. I'm just dealing with the facts on the table. How about you focus on the facts on the table and stop deflecting? Okay. So
I'm
let's
not
deal with the
deflecting. I'm
definition
just
that you
trying to
just
help you
stated.
out. Mm-hmm.
Now that definition that you stated, right? You do not believe in that concept, correct?
Right.
Okay. I don't believe in that concept either. Now, if you want me to show from you, from the text itself, which we was prepared to discuss, that that does not exist in the text as well, then allow us to prove that for you
You're gonna prove it how?
through the text.
You're gonna prove it. You're gonna prove to me that hell is like that, how they describe?
I'm going to prove to you that hell is whatever the context dictates according to the literature itself.
But that's not what it is, man. That's your interpretation of it.
That is what it is. And let me show
I
you
don't
how
think
to do
so.
this. It's a method of interpretation because any literary text has to be interpreted. You're aware of that, right? That's part of the translation process. You're aware of that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In order for you to read Homer's Iliad, you have to trust in the translation process, which incorporates interpretation. Are you aware of that?
Hold on, what are you
Sure.
guys talking about?
He's trying to prove to me that hell is exists.
I didn't prove to him that hell exists in the way
No, I
he's
said you're
defining it.
trying.
I'm showing him
Hold
what
on.
the text is literally
Who
saying. And
cares?
we
Yes, even though
gave
I
a
told
proof
him to use,
text,
even though I told
which
him to
is
use something else outside of the religious text, like he's still doing it. But go ahead.
So
all right.
define what is the
Here it
point
is,
then?
right? He wants me to prove hell outside of a religious and literary context, which cannot be done. He is asking for something that is still begging the
Okay,
question. He's not aware of the
define.
logic that he's
Okay,
utilizing to try
define.
No,
and
no,
get an
no.
answer
I'm
Hold
or
on,
very aware.
surmise an
Bert.
answer.
Hold on a second.
I'm
Divine. Hold
very
on.
aware.
Hold on. Do you realize, Divine, by you just telling me that you cannot prove hell outside the
Exactly.
Bible? That's exactly what Bert is
That's all I'm
saying.
saying.
Why have a further conversation where you just accepted what he's saying?
Yes.
I don't
Thank
get
you.
it.
Next.
All right. Would you like me to answer?
You
Baba?
just did answer.
Baba Yaga, the boogeyman. All right. So
It's
look, this
not
is
the
what we're going to
boogeyman.
do.
Learn
Okay.
what
So
Baba
we can
Yaga
address.
is, and then tell me what it
Oh,
is.
hold on. Brother, I know what
No,
it
you
is.
don't
Just
know
slow
what it
down. I'm just
is.
being
No.
funny. Look, slow down. I'm just being funny. Slow
I
down,
know you're
brother.
funny.
Right?
I've been
Because in the
listening to
human
you, and
range of
you're very
speech,
funny.
there are limited sounds, and every semantic value is applied differently per the culture. Okay. So let me
There's
finish
only
addressing what
one
he's saying.
culture that has
He
Baba
is asking.
Yaga, and it's not the Hollywood
Okay.
version.
So I never said it was the Hollywood version, sir.
Calling me
Hollywood
the
always gets things
boogeyman
wrong.
is the Hollywood version.
I am joking. So maybe you don't know what a joke is. I
Well,
wasn't
you
being
suck at
serious.
joking.
I was joking. and you're taking it too seriously.
Oh, so
Nah,
you
you're
being a
taking
Chill.
that
It's
Hebrew,
too
okay.
you
seriously.
being a Hebrew Israelite is a
Hey,
joke.
chill.
That's a
It's
joke.
okay. It's
Come
okay.
on,
I
man.
don't know why
All
you're
right,
so
divine,
serious here.
divine. Go ahead, divine. Just stop
So
being passive
so
aggressive,
Bert,
bro.
I got you. No, I'm cool. So what I'm saying is, you mentioned hell, right? You are superimposing that word hell onto a text that does not have that word in it. So when you look at the Tanakh or the Hebrew Bible, there's no word for hell there. It does not exist. This is part of the interpretation process that leads to a translation. You're going from a donor language, which is the original language in which the literature was written, to a recipient language, a language that's trying to understand what the donor language is saying within its text.
Oh,
So you're
okay. So
taking a
because it was
concept that's
translated.
called hell and that does not exist within the Hebrew language nor the literary text that we are referring to. What we're trying to show you is that Sheol is the closest equivalent and it means the grave. And we gave you a clear example of what that means. Now you have to
Right.
ask yourself, well, if hell is not transliterated from the Hebrew, so transliterated means you try to keep the phonemes from the donor language into the recipient language so they can sound similar. And by doing so, you also retain the semantic value of said word from the donor language to the recipient language. There's no such thing like that that exists in regards to hell from the donor language. This is what we're trying to tell you. So that concept that's fabricated and outlined to what it is has nothing to do with the original tongue in which the literature was written. That's what we're trying to say to you.
Oh, so
So if you
Israelites
understand
don't
that
believe.
concept,
Okay, so
then you understand
Israelites
that
don't believe in the same.
hell is unrelated to the word
Okay, so
Sheol that we're trying to showcase to you in the
Israelites don't
Hebrew
believe in
Bible.
the same hell as Christians. Then that's what you're saying. Or you guys don't
Obviously,
believe
I
in
don't know
hell
why
at
you didn't
all.
get that from Christian Corey. He was just saying that to you. He just said that to
No,
you.
no. I mean, bro, you're a little more articulate if I'm being honest.
Well, I have to because I do this professionally, so I appreciate that. So
And
what I'm
Ooh,
he
simply
also
saying to you,
he
professionally,
also lies, but he
yeah,
also lies
professionally.
professionally. He lies professionally too.
bro. I had you against the
I
ropes. I
can't. What
hope
you
you
say,
didn't.
MOG? I couldn't hear MOG. What was that?
I say he lies professionally too. He just sounds better. That's all.
Hey, I
Who,
got a
Bert?
question. Is
Okay,
We
go
only
hey
ahead.
went off
divine?
question. He's talking about you,
That's
Divine,
cool.
because he was talking
Hey
about Christian
divine,
earlier.
divine, divine.
Uh,
Is there any way to like prove like for a specific individual that they have like a gene that goes back to an Israelite?
It's this idiot talking about I'm watching you.
Yeah, there's no way to prove that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share an article with you that you can take a look at, peer reviewed, where it discusses can a gene, what we call genotype, lead back to the pertinent paternal haplogroup that defines what a quote unquote Israelite is. It's very difficult to do that, right? And I'm going to share with you the article and it will explain why, so that way you have more insight into it, okay? I'm going to drop it in the chat for you, Data.
Why
Yeah,
Give me
do
and
1 second.
Israelites
that's
sound like
that's
they're
what I was
retarded?
saying earlier is like the amount of admixtures that you have in that particular area of the world. It's like you can literally see where there's like multiple and then you have haplogroup, sub haplogroup like right on top of each other back and forth in that area. It's just fully concentrated. And then you have to go way out from there to get to where there are more isolated haplogroups, like say in the North and South American continent where you have primarily Q and just a little bit of C, sort of thing. Um,
To your
and
point, Corey.
so
Oh, go ahead, Corey.
yeah, all over the Levantine you have just about every haplogroup
Facts.
represented in some form.
Thank
So
you.
yeah.
Thank you. So you have J1, J2, R1A, R1B, E1B1. All these haplogroups were there, and the reason for that is because the recent out of Africa origin of mankind or Homo sapiens sapien, right? Because they've exited out of Africa, the first admixtures that occurred was in that region of the Levantines, which she just referenced. So when it comes to actually defining which haplogroup, maternally or paternally, defines what a quote unquote Israelite is, something coming from a piece of literature, there is several things you have to do in order to triangulate what is the best proposition for that case. And the article that I shared with you showcases you that that's going to be impossible to do. And the reason for that is because if you look at entire world, all the people that say that they are Jews, forget black people, right? All the people that say that they are Jews, when they are tested, They have various paternal haplogroups: J1, J2, R1A, R1B, E1B1, etc. You can't have all of these be the same haplogroup that defines what an Israelite is, because it goes back to a paternal ancestor, a patriarch. And that patriarch only has one haplogroup. So the question is, which one is telling the truth? Ooh, they all have the customs, they all have the oral traditions, the migration patterns, they have everything that ties them back to their identity as Jews. So which one is the real Jew? Please stand up. So that's the problem
I'm
with just using
standing.
DNA to identify that. And I shared an article that you can take a look at with those pertinent
I'm
details.
standing.
Be humble. Sit down.
Well, he
Yeah,
asked me to
and
stand up.
that was like kind of my whole point was that the amount of in and out migrations of that area, because people also forget that as you have interglacial periods and then more periods of glaciation, people got isolated, people got pushed back down south, you know, and you had varying like, and we're talking like over millennia back and forth. The whole point, like the entire Arabia Peninsula, but particularly the area, you know, the Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, all the way down to Egypt, down that west coast of the Arabian Peninsula, and then Persia, you know, Iran, Iraq area, and Sumeria. Those particular areas are so syncretic, both in cultural traditions as well as just in mixing of populations as far as like genetics go, that you can't possibly say, like the UN will not even make assertions that there's an indigenous people to any of these areas, because of the amount of migration back and forth. So yeah.
But I think even if you include the Bibles, like it seems impossible because it says that they got captivated or kept in captivity by the Assyrians, and then later on the Assyrians were in captivity along with probably the Israelites with the Babylonians. And then the
And
Babylonians
the
themselves were
Sumerians, yeah.
eventually, Babylonians were taken over eventually by like Rome. You know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
no way, it's so unlikely that a descendant survived through captivity throughout the entire time. It's so unlikely.
So what
Well,
So,
are
yeah,
these
so
the
guys?
did
the
it.
What
the
are
Let
thing
me
is
just,
so?
like
Hold on,
the,
but then can I ask, what are all these Jews around the world? What were they doing? Were they just lying?
yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So to answer your
no,
question,
they're
Day,
out
They just all
migration.
just
we,
lying or
we,
Yeah.
we
something?
have to we have to look at what we call material culture. Okay, so when you excavate a site, there are strata or different layers of sediment that contain certain artifacts. Okay, realia, fauna, flora, etc., etc. When you do a deep enough dig and you find a particular context in which there's a city, a town, countryside that a populace lived, they leave behind items. That's called realia, things that are man made. Okay. When they leave these items behind, it is up to the archaeologist who extrapolates that and puts it and gets it categorized, gets it in a collection, and gets it published to actually identify what these things are based on their level of expertise, but also make it public for the rest of the academic community to weigh in on. When there are cultural items that are left behind, material, physical items, then we have to decide what is the makeup, why is it here, who had it, etc. An example of that is that there was an archive of cuneiform tablets that was found in an area that's called the Al Yuhudu, the town of the Jews. This was in Babylon, and it went from Babylon into the Persian period. We have an archive of records. You can look it up. In these archive of records, we have a list of various receipts for transactional purposes, land grants that was given, contracts that are made, marriages that are had. And then typically in these things, names are signed in order to validate said contract. And in those contacts that we see of these cuneiform tablets, we see a litany of names that relate back to a people that we'll call Israelites that were taken into captivity there. What this does is that it helps to situate the region in which they lived, why they was in that region. Again, what they did was in the hegemony of these Israelite vassal kingdoms, they would take the upper middle class and the upper class and they would resituate them somewhere where they would generate a profit for the kingdom that is taking them into captivity. So typically they would situate them along rivers like the Tigris and Euphrates River, and then they would have them perform either horticulture if it's in our highest deeps, or if it's in the lower steeps, and they would perform irrigation and they would tend the land, and in return they can keep possession of that land as long as they take care of it, and the generated funds that come from it, that means if you have fruits, vegetables, whatever you generate from that, is given as a tax to the owner of that kingdom or whoever is in charge at that time. So we are able to get that context that those groups did not intermarry in the beginning. Later on, they began to do so. But then when you have the Cyrus cylinders that's allowing these uh, refugees to expatriate back to their native lands, now we had a situation where, as we can see detailed in the text, that there was an issue because of these foreign marriages. So they had to separate from everybody they married that was foreign, right? Because this, again, this was a concept that was believed by this people group. So when we follow the material culture, we can determine the material religion because they also had things within a religious context. They had altars, right? They had votive offerings, right? They had various items like the JPCs, etc., in which you can determine that what is the religion that they actually follow based on the items left behind, how they lived, what they ate, etc., etc. So you don't have to assume, right? But the idea of ethnogenesis, how a group becomes an ethnic identity on its own, distinct from its neighbors, can be determined based on the material culture and material religion that is extrapolated by archaeologists who dig and find these things and publish it for public review. So that way, interpretations can be made in regards to what you're looking at and what it means within the context in which it's found.
It's called a bill of
So
sale.
there's ways that we can determine it. It's not a mystery or a secret or anything like
So,
that.
Yeah.
And
what have
But
somebody,
they?
I
Can I
oh,
ask
also
Divine?
and I noticed that Christian isn't here, but like coming from a man, all of a sudden it's believable. So just saying, guys, pay attention
about
to
what
how
you
you treat
said, what
people.
did you say about me?
Yeah, Divine's not saying anything I wasn't saying before, but since I couldn't cite one specific line from one specific book that made a clear statement about it, suddenly I'm like not credible.
No,
You
it
know,
was when you was challenged and you did not do it. So if you would like to
no, oh my God.
challenge him right now, and then I'm quite sure he
Well,
can present the material that he's
so
speaking
Can I
for.
please finish speaking?
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you. I did mention the complexity of excavating tells. I did mention the movements around the area. I did mention all of the various cultures that he mentioned, right? But that's not good enough for you all. So I'm just
Yeah,
saying
she
because
did
I'm
mention
a, I'm a
all those
female.
people.
So, this is very silly. Um, but thank you, Divine, for outlining that so succinctly. I would also like to point out what I had mentioned is the transition from monolatry and henotheism, right? This actually took place around the time he's mentioning, where we have these cuneiform cylinders and text, right? So the cylinders and cuneiform, like literally most of the cuneiform records that we have from Sumeria in Babylon, right? They literally all they did was they're mostly like accounting records. They didn't like write a lot of stories or anything like that. So it's like what
Like
you
how
want
many
to
sheep
cite.
they
It's
had?
mostly a statistical analysis of how people did things, right? And and then you do things like seriation of artifacts and pottery shards and all that kind of stuff. But the transition from henotheism and monolatry to a more monotheistic bent coincides with these more isolation and like need to
So
create an ethnic identity that isn't tied to a geographic place because people are being moved around. And that's why you have this transition to more monotheism. It's not like we worship the god of this hill, right? It's we worship the god of these people, and so wherever you move the people, that god becomes valid. And it's a big transition that you have, because for the most part cities in that area, I like to joke about it being like a big game of capture the flag, right? You invade a city, you steal their idol from their temple, and you win. So and that's kind of how it goes, and you hold the idol captive in order to exact tribute or whatever you need. And this is kind of how it worked. And this all coincides, if you want a biblical reference, it coincides with Josiah, right? And it coincides with the reframing and the rewriting of the Deuteronomical texts to reflect more of more monotheism than actually was present at the time during the accounts that they were making. So
Wait, what was it rewritten it from? You said in Deuteronomy.
it was rewritten by Josiah
Okay, okay.
later.
You mean his
In
royal court of scribes? Because the
Yeah,
kings typically
all
don't
those
write
folks.
the
Yeah,
literature. Yeah, yeah.
the regime, put it that way.
Okay, there you go. That's better. I
Yeah,
got you.
more you know, like
So
yeah, not him personally, but like yeah, the whole regime.
yeah, so what she's mentioning is looking at transmission of a text that begins orally first and reflects the political, social, and economic conditions of a people group over a period of time. That's what we get represented by the literature of that populace, right? So what she's saying in regards to monotheism, she's saying that monotheism was not inherently the provident religion of this particular people group, right? So more than likely, like she said, is henotheism or henotheism, which literally means that there are a pantheon of deities, but one is singled out to be supreme, right? And then monolatry, what she's speaking about, is that because one is singled out to be supreme, that one deity then receives all of the worship, all of the votive offerings, and all of the due homage as a patron, right? So this is what happens over time. So the idea of kingship amongst the people groups then gets taken from a literal earthly level and projected into an ethereal level, right? Where certain things that you learn in regards that's done in a human or humanistic context is now projected upward and is defined in regards as a supernatural realm that replicates the same, right? But then over time, changes occur in the thought forms of the people and where you have ideas that start getting disseminated because they're side to side with other neighboring cultures, right? Or sister cultures, sister people groups. So this idea of one God, this monotheism is what she's saying, happened during the renovation and the I would say revolution that was brought on by Josiah. And she's sourcing this from secular articles, right? That they look at the context of these Jews that lived during that time period, which we're talking about 6th century BCE, and to see how they lived, what they thought by looking at any, again, material items that's left behind that substantiates what they believe. For example, the Misha Stela is a stone, a slab of stone that became a stela. Stela is something, a stone that you erect that you put administrative writing on because you want it to be known publicly from whoever comes across it, in which this culture called the Moabites had issues or beef with the neighboring people group called Israelites. In that stele, they identified the people group they had issues with, they identified the king, and they identified their patron deity, aka Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. That's who they identified, right? This is a non biased source. This is not literature in any way. It's meant to be an administrative decree because what it substantiates is that their deity, the Moabites deity, Chemosh, has given them the power and authority to own the territory in which they was fighting over. And this is something typically you see in the political arena in the ancient Near East, right? So they're identifying things about that people group that people group does not have to identify about themselves to authenticate it. So when we see this reflection within the literature called the Bible, all it's doing is using rhetoric to enhance what was already substantiated in the archaeological record about this particular people group.
Okay, that's a lot of information.
Okay.
I can speak.
Anybody else want to speak?
I can speak right quick. I just wanted to say that I appreciate you citing the sources in the chat, Divine. I appreciate that, and because that's how we're able to learn and grasp these things, and actually going into the archaeological findings that also support it. So, Divine, is it your position um, that there is archaeology that supports the existence of the Israelites? or the migration patterns of the Israelites. Is that your position?
Yeah, that's what the archaeological records show. Then the interpretation of that is what differs in academia.
Got it. So, and I wanted to make sure that that was crystal clear, because when we speak about the Bible, I mean, of course, that's the holy text, but some people who just study secular sources may not accept that. So then we would have to speak outside of that and start talking about archaeology, anthropology, migration patterns, all the things that I named earlier. And then when we have to get into it from a non-biased standpoint, and divine is saying the same thing. But he's saying that there are archaeological findings that shows us who the Israelites are today. Do you have a position on that, divine, who the Israelites are today?
Yeah. So there are, because of mass migration that occurred through several deportations, that's recorded in things such as Salamandra III, Black Obelisk, or the Babylonian Chronicles under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, et cetera, right? We know that there was a people group that existed in the Central Levantine period that today is called Palestine, that had a particular culture, they had their customs, they had a particular diet, et cetera, that existed in that region, in which they, according to their material religious items that was found, had a belief in a deity called Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, which can also be substantiated as a much older deity from the Ugaritic tablets going back to the 17th century BCE. This deity's name is also found in the Soleb Temple in Egypt, as well as Amarna West, which are two Egyptian sites that have the same name, that deity, amongst the Shashu peoples that lived in the Transjordan region. Right. So there were a lot of proposals that came out in regards to how did this people group come about. One idea that was proposed is that they were a result of a rebellion. So after the fall of the Bronze Age period, there was a gap in time in which the power that Egypt yielded in the Levantine region ceased as they went into their third intermediate period. When that time period happened, there were a bunch of vassal groups that existed in the Levantine region that were vying for power, and you had these group of herdsmen to the south in the plains and to the north providing horticulture that decided that they were going to develop their own identity amongst the neighboring groups that existed here. This is called the peasant revolt model, right? That's one argument that's made in regards to how this people group that today are called Jews came about. The second one is that because they were Shashu, that did subscribe to a deity called Yod-Heh-Wah, which is a shortened form of Yod-Heh-Wah-Fe, and they were found mostly amongst the Transjordan region, in which they were captured by the Egyptians and put in chenus or cartouches to identify all the enemies that Pharaoh dominated and controlled so he can showcase his power, that there were heavy migrations because of the oppression that they were facing into the Levantine region. And these individuals are also herdsmen that grazed from pasture to pasture. And they found in the upper plains a pasture area where they could be sedentary, which means they could settle down and start a civilization. And in the process of that, there were other groups that were there as well, and they unified, and then they created a pact amongst one another to do trade and business. And this was another way in which this idea of Israelites developed in that region, right? And then these two other models as well, that's like a combination of the first two, and one of them is a little bit more nuanced. But there's two competing views. The one that is dominant right now is the first, the peasant revolt model that was introduced by Israel Finkelstein and his associates back in 2001. Right. Since then, it's been challenged. Since then, there's been modifications and additional nuances added. But you have other scholars such as Manfred Bietek, who is an Austrian archaeologist that actually works in the digs in the Nile Delta, the Pelagic region, in which he developed his own understanding of who these Israelite peoples are, who was amongst the Asiatics or the Amu that lived in that region that went and migrated into the Levant region because they have certain telltale features of their culture, such as the four-room house, which is found in two sites in Egypt and the Late Bronze period, that then ends up in the Levantine region as a definitive cultural trait that identifies that particular people group that arose in that region. How they build their houses, is architecture is one of many material realia that defines a people group. right? So Manfred Tech gave his expose in regards to this people group, where he posits them as existing as proto-Israelites in the third century, as we get from the Merenptah Stele, and then developing or moving and migrating because of the Egyptian oppression into the Levantine region, mostly in the central countryside where there was little to no Egyptian control in that area. And so then when the yokes of Egypt was thrown off after the destruction of the Bronze Age that happened by a myriad of different natural disasters, the sea peoples, etc., now you had people groups that were now able to fully express their identity without the hegemony of Egypt weighing down on them and forcing them through alliances to identify with their gods and with their culture and religion, right? So that's where those two things showcase. Now, the Bible itself is what we call literature. That is a rhetoric. A rhetoric is a key word because there's an intention behind it. Rhetoric that's designed to showcase the myriad of ideas that was encapsulated into the people group that come in coalescence over time, right? So it's not just one person writing all of this stuff. These things are collected over time and they represent different aspects of the culture of these people groups. Some of them can be substantiated in the archaeological record from material finds, and some of it can't. And there's nothing wrong with that because when you read an anthology of any people group, you will find that there are ideas that they express in literature that cannot be found in the archaeological record. That's just a normal way of identifying how people groups exist and things that they reflect. For example, if anybody here reads Lord of the Rings, can you show me where that's at on the planet today? Can you show me where I can find that dragon at?
It
Can you show
isn't.
me where I can find those orgs at? You can't find them anywhere, right? But that was a reflection of the peoples because of where they came from. There's tales, oral traditions that come from where these people came from, where they tell these tales of elves and orgs and all these other entities and beings that they've seen in
Mindful,
these
mindful.
mystical
Where the fuck
forests
have
and
you
so
been,
forth.
mindful? My
Yeah,
bad, my bad. Mindful. Where the fuck you been? My bad.
Tolkien actually created the entire Middle Earth sort of like thing because the British Isles in and of themselves lack a unique sort of like cosmology or theogony of their own, and so like he literally took a whole bunch of disparate like common tropes that are throughout northern and western Europe and the British Isles and Ireland and all of that, and basically made a mythology. And his knowledge of languages, dialects, and things like that is just, yeah, it's crazy. But that's why it resonates so much with basic white people. I'll say is because of that, But anybody exposed to like Western culture in general, um, it's this big amalgamation. But I will say that Tolkien elves are very different from original like concept of elves. They're
Of
more
course,
like
because
angelic
over
beings.
time,
Yeah.
yeah, over time, those things change and they morph based on people migrating away from the region and encountering other areas and other people groups that add additional details. So, yeah, of course, the further away you are from the source, you're going to have some degree or frequency of deviation, right? So that's natural, and again, like you said, he had great knowledge of these things. But what I'm trying to showcase is that just because what's reflected in literature is not found in the archaeological record does not mean that it was not a reality of the people group who
Right.
disseminated these ideas, right? So this is
Right.
what we're
Yeah.
trying to
And
say. So when people try to force you to find things in the archaeological record that were not intended to be found in the archaeological record, and because it cannot be found, to dismiss it outright, that is not how you do proper scholarship. It doesn't work that way, right? You got to take it
Right.
holistically, all the items you find in regards to the people group. So I subscribe to the minority view that you had mentioned, Corey. What my perspective was on it, in which there were these peoples of the Shashus who were herders, herdsmen, and so forth that was in the Transjordan region, and some of them being in Canaan. And, they entered into Egypt, as we see two Egyptian steles that allow these people to come in and settle amongst them. And then they develop a large populace, as is found by Manfred Tech. And then over time, certain things happen that then force an exodus of these people from out of that region